understand abstract ideas. The world of science has been very good to us because scientists have identified a set of key ideas that are so powerful to teach that discipline that they say, hey, better to teach these concepts than to teach a lot of just straight content to kids throughout the K-12 continuum. So a focus on concepts like change, patterns, systems are, again, the concepts of interest in the world of science. And if you can, in fact, focus on concepts from science, you begin to see also how flexible those concepts are when it comes to applying them to every other subject area. So science, in a sense, in my view, is the queen of interdisciplinary instruction because we have the tools to really make that the basis of all of our learning across the curriculum. I've included for you an example of one of the scaffolds that we've used a lot in our curriculum, the elements of reasoning that were developed by Richard Paul. And what I like about this model is that, again, it keeps front and center for students the importance of real-world thinking and real-world problem solving and how we do it in oral discourse and in written discourse in the real world. We start with an issue or problem and begin to track that problem through a series of steps, as you can see identified in this particular slide. We also have other scaffolds that can be used. There's one in creative writing that we've used a lot at the center in the area of literature, and that is to get students to focus on the hero and to realize that when they begin their own writing and their serious writing in a creative way, they can create their own heroes and follow their heroes on a journey that is a way of handling a problem or a challenge and learn as a result of that journey certain understandings that allow them then to return home with solutions and answers to move forward in the real world. So that's another example of a scaffold in a totally different subject area, but that serves a similar purpose to what you saw with the critical thinking example. We also have a scaffold for persuasive writing that has been very powerful in terms of our use of it. And in fact, our studies indicate that if this is taught systematically to students from low-income backgrounds, it will take them longer to master it and to utilize it, but that they can do it if, in fact, they have the support to do so. And it's the notion of, again, providing a metaphor for how you construct a powerful essay. You think about building a Whopper with a top bun and a bottom bun, which represent the introduction and the conclusion. The meaty reasons are in the middle, and the condiments, of course, constitute the elaboration. Those condiments of ketchup and mustard, onions, relish, that in fact make it a cohesive sandwich, also makes for a very cohesive essay, single paragraph or multi-paragraph. There's also, of course, a good four-question strategy that I'm quite fond of because it traverses higher level thinking in multiple modes, including the creative mode with divergent questioning, as well as memory cognition, convergent, and evaluative. And I've included an example that you can read on your own when these slides appear online for you to show how that can be manipulated. Many teachers like this model because there's only 4 questions that need to be generated, but they all represent 4 different types of higher level thinking. So it's a powerful tool. The use of concepts like systems that I mentioned earlier, again, is a really powerful tool to provide a scaffold like this where students can analyze a system and begin to look at things like elements, interactions, boundaries, what would be input to a system and what would be output. This becomes a wonderful tool in a science classroom to begin to look at different systems that they may be studying, whether it's the respiratory system or different other aspects of the human body system, or how those systems then begin to interact together, becomes a very powerful learning experience, coupled with getting students to explain their understanding and to articulate it in oral discourse, both for their classmates as well as to themselves, as to what it is they've come to understand. And then I've included some example tasks for you in terms of looking at concept-based learning. Moving on to the third problem, which has to do with assessing gifted student learning effectively. I think that as we look at this problem, again, I have indicated that some of those resolutions have to do with the use of more performance-based assessments, but we also need to look at a growth model, both pre-post, but also over a time series. How are gifted students doing over the years that they spend in an elementary gifted program? How are they doing at the middle school level from grades 6 through 8? What about secondary level? What indicates that the program has been effective there and that their learning has really changed in positive ways? Those are some additional problem resolutions to the ones that I've already discussed that I think are important for us to pay attention to. And I've included one of the science assessments that we have used systematically to be able to show that. The fourth problem has to do with incorporating creative and innovative thinking within a traditional academic environment. Much of what I've talked about so far sort of presupposes that there will be a strong emphasis on high-level advanced content for gifted and talented students, and that we know clearly how to do that, and that we will, in fact, engage in that. But I think that it's important that we consider creativity and innovation as a key part of what needs to be delivered within all of our programs and services. And there are ways, I think, that we can approach that. One is to deliberately use creative skills and strategies. There are various creative thinking models that are available that can be incorporated into classrooms and into programs. Indeed, programs like Future Problem Solving use that schemata as the basis for the program itself. We can also systematically ask students to create products within the domain in which they're most interested and, in fact, have the greatest desire to proceed. And we can also teach them innovative tactics. You know, how do we go about dealing with innovation? What's the difference between just being creative and being innovative? Innovation holds people accountable, in a sense, to the design of products that work in the real world. That's an important understanding for gifted students to have. It's not just mucking around every day in the laboratory, but it's, in fact, having a key focus for the nature of what's going on. I've included a set of those creative strategies for you. If you're not familiar with them, I think you can Google any of them and be able to find a model that will be useful to you. And I've also included a set of findings from creativity studies that we have done in terms of working with K-12 students. What I think this research suggests, and this is not research that's been done in the field of gifted, but it's been outside the field of gifted, is that we can, in fact, use these creative strategies with all learners. They're beneficial for all students. And the more that we, in fact, can focus on divergent thinking performance, again, the more that we are likely to prepare students effectively for the real world of problem solving that they will be facing. Problem 5 has to do with ensuring affective development of the gifted. How do we ensure, again, that programs aren't just cognitively oriented, but in fact do pay attention to the affective needs of the gifted, particularly since our brain research tends to suggest that affective response precedes cognitive response. Very important that we get students hooked into the nature of what's going on in classrooms. So hooking into the affective aspects of gifted students becomes an important part of what we do. There's many ways to go about this. I've listed 3 on the slide that I think have proven to be successful in the programs that I have studied and in programs that I have observed. The first is on meaning making, helping students create autonomy in their own learning through helping ensure that what they're studying is of great interest to them, of great import to them. The issue of identity, we're all interested in that no matter what stage of development we are. Who am I? Where am I going? At every stage of life, those become critical questions. So too for young gifted students and for students all the way through the K-12 continuum. So always thinking about themselves in relationship to the nature of what they're studying. Do I want to be a scientist? What does it mean to be a scientist? What, in fact, are the skills and attributes that I possess or need to possess in order to get there? So career development related to identity becomes a very powerful direction to go. And then the third area that I think is critical for affective development has to do with an emphasis on leadership skills. Instead of focusing on pro-social development, which I see a lot of programs doing for the gifted, teaching them how to get along with other people, let's rather teach them the skills, the underlying skills that will help them in most situations, not only to get along, but in fact to assume leadership positions within small group dynamic settings as well as larger group settings. So those are some ideas on affective development. Teaching metacognition. I can't say too much about this. I think it's an important part always of what we are doing with gifted and talented learners. And it is a great bridge between the affective and the cognitive if we deliberately employ it. And by metacognition, I mean helping students understand how to plan, how to monitor, how to assess their own learning, especially when it comes to independent study projects. We have not done a particularly good job, the research suggests, in students' performance on independent study. Why? Because many times we don't take the time to actually teach to these metacognitive skills. For many gifted students, they need to know how to handle an independent study project. They don't just naturally gravitate there. Only about a third of gifted learners are what we would call independent learners. Majority are satellite learners. They learn best with other people, either a teacher and or their peer group. So it's important that we provide the support structures they need in order to be able to foster the high-level learning we want. And then lastly, on this point, I think reflection, again, is a very powerful part of teaching kids metacognition. Every teacher in the classroom, at least once a week, can set aside 15 minutes and ask students to reflect on what they've learned that week that was most important, what they intend to do with that learning, and what is it that they still need to learn that they have not yet done. Those become, I think, important ways to ensure that metacognition becomes a part of the nature of the learning for them. The sixth problem, and I'm looking at my time here, and so I need to run perhaps more quickly.
You've got 3 minutes left, Joyce.
3 minutes, okay. In 3 minutes, I just want to give you a feel for what the rest of the presentation is about. I'll try to synthesize it. The sixth problem, I think, has to do with motivation, and I have some suggestions for that in terms of including things like collaborative teaming.
I'm sorry, you can have 7 to 8 minutes.
Okay. You are extremely generous. Thank you so much. I also think that having kids focus, gifted students focus on what I call high challenge, low risk activities. Too often, gifted students think that everything they do is high stakes, so it has to be done really, really well. And I think we want to, impress upon them, particularly with creative and innovative activities and skills, that we really want them to accept challenge and also accept not necessarily always being able to meet that challenge. So doing things like mathematical problems from antiquity that have never been solved. It's not that they're going to solve the problem, but they're going to look at a hard problem and they're going to try to figure out, how can I approach this problem? There's a lot of learning that comes from failing to find the answer, but from studying the problem. The same with looking at proverbs, the same with looking at the processes of scientific discovery. I think we need more of that within the context of the curriculum. Which again leads to deeper reflection, deeper understanding of self and what one's limits are at a given point in time, and how do I move beyond those limits to move to ever higher levels of performance. Problem